So I guess I have one question for you, and that is, if you could see any band or artist, living or dead, at any time, who would it be and why?
All right, so we're going to do with our number one, the one that we would see.
This is it.
Right
like,
here.
Who would you see? We're going to start there and then just work our way through.
Yeah, we'll just go through like some honorable mentions afterwards that we're like strong on. But if I had to say anything, Ringer, I had to go. And this is where I was taking the artist on their timeline when they were the best performance and when to see them. And I kind of kept them in the same time era that they were really, really great because I feel like it would just be more natural that way. But I want to see Fleetwood Mac anywhere in the world in spring and summer of 1969. So this is definitely one of the best live show era lineups of Fleetwood Mac. This is really the best. Everybody knows I'm a pretty big Peter Green fan, so that's where it comes in. Peter Green, just absolutely love him. Bluesman guitars, absolutely love it. This is shortly about 6 months after getting Danny Kirwan, who was only 19 at the time. They added guitarist Danny Kirwan to the shuffle, and this followed my favorite album, which is more blues-driven, but Mr. Wonderful, which was released in October of 1968. And so this is a blues, more blues than rock, but has light touches of rock era of them. And I really think this is like the perfect blend of blues and rock. They were getting into more rock and more experimental music as what would be shown on Then Play On. So this is their middle era of Mr. Wonderful, their second album, and Then Play On with their third. So this really cool shuffling, Danny Kirwan and Peter Green working in collaboration, not just in songwriting aspects, but also just on guitar. So seeing them live is really, really good. Like when I watch some of their old videos of them playing out in Paris, when them playing out in Germany, stuff like that, I really see a great rhythm section kicking ass. I see great guitarist work from Peter Green, Danny Kirwan, and Jeremy Spencer, who is the king of slide blues guitar in England at the time, was the best. So you're getting three different guitars, really kicking ass. They got a great song catalog, and I'll talk about songs that you need to hear when they're live at that time. But you really look at it. There's three different singers, three different guitarists, dynamic group of musicians, several different styles of music going on. It is absolutely wonderful. Some of the comments about their guitar playing, Peter Green B.B. King said of Peter Green that he gave when listening to Peter Green, B.B. King said it gave him the cold sweats just listening to him play. It's just absolutely wonderful. John Mayall, right when Peter Green played his first concert with him, after Peter Green replaced Eric Clapton and the Blues Breakers, John Mayall said he easily surpassed Clapton. I mean, it's just great. And then at the time when Peter Green was tutoring Danny Kirwan, he was trying to, before he recruited him into Fleetwood Mac, Danny Kirwan was getting rave reviews about his blues guitars, including being possibly one of the best English blues guitar reps of that time. So in general, this group is fucking killing it, and they're just kick ass. And to say it, I've never seen Fleetwood Mac live in any form of the matter, but my main draw would be to see Danny Kirwan and Peter Green. And Peter Green never really left the United States because he broke down with schizophrenia, unfortunately, in the 70s. So he never really left England to do anything, even though he still continued to play live in the England area. So definitely, if I had to see any group, any artist, it would be Peter Green for sure, but that whole group with that lineup in the 69, in the time that they were growing, I would want to see that group. And at this time, songs I would want to hear when they were on stage, which they did play intermittently at times. Black Magic Woman, they wrote that song that Santana made famous, more popular in America and throughout the world. Great interpretation, by the way, Santana. Good job on that one. Need Your Love So Bad, one of the greatest love songs. Love playing that. If you got a honey or a hubby at home and you just want to kind of like do a slow dance, pull up Need Your Love So Bad. Would be great in the concert. World Keep On Turning is absolutely wonderful. Albatross is actually one of their most famous songs of all time. And then one of Danny Kerwin's, one of my favorite ones, that's just kind of hidden track, but it's a great blues rocker, and he rips it on guitar. Something Inside of Me is the song. Look it up. But that is the group, that is the era, that is the lineup I want to see the most, because Peter Green is not just a hero, but he is a legend. The group itself is legendary with this deep, deep story. It's just absolutely wonderful. You're seeing the very beginnings. They're turning from blues to rock, and then they kind of get into that pop realm after Peter Green leaves and Jeremy Spencer leaves, and it's Bob Welch, Danny Kerwin, Christine Perfect, who's Christine McVie, gets in the group, and they kind of turn a little bit pop right after, about a year after this part. So you're really seeing a great depth of a band and artist at this time. So Fleetwood Mac and Peter Green, you're my number one, baby.
You know, I didn't know what you were going to pick, but I'm also I'm not surprised either that you went with Fleetwood Mac, just given the way you talked about them. But I honestly had no idea where you were going to go. I didn't know if you'd go kind of a classic band like Fleetwood Mac, or if you go someone newer or somewhere in the middle, or some I thought you might pull some obscure blues guy or something, just deep down in the water. But I think you made a good choice with Fleetwood Mac.
Yeah, I think that's one that I feel like would give me the all-around experience. Seeing Peter Green just play guitar would, even if it was just him plucking the E note on stage eating a ham sandwich, it's I would pay for that. I would. Yeah. Just because it's fucking cool,
Right.
Yeah. All right, so that was my number one. Ringer, where are you going with your first choice?
So when I was thinking about this, I was just trying to run through a list of names and bands that I really like, that I've grown up listening to, people that have influenced me, and also playing with that idea of do I want to see something that's iconic? Do I want to just kind of put my own thing together? And eventually what I ended up settling on kind of actually surprised me a little bit, because I almost thought this might have been too cliche that I even went with this answer. But I chose to see, if I could see anyone living or dead at any time, I would see Jimi Hendrix at the Monterey Pop Festival in 1967. And now I thought that one, because that one's kind of that one's notorious. It's iconic. It's known. That's the show where he burned his guitar on the stage after the last song, smashed it around. That's that show. And it's iconic. There's photos, there's posters. I had a poster of it at one point. So it's a well-known show. So maybe a little too on the head. But when I think about it, I think just with Jimi Hendrix in general, there's arguably no one that's more influential for the direction of modern rock than Jimi Hendrix is. Even if you don't like him or don't listen to his music, because I know a lot of people who are good guitar players are I don't like Jimi Hendrix. I don't think he's very good or whatever. You can name criticisms there, but I think he had so much influence on so many people in just the way he brought fast playing guitar into pop culture. He wasn't the first to do this. He wasn't the first to play that guitar in that way necessarily, but he was the first to bring it to that next level and bring it to the mainstream. And so I think that is one of the reasons why I would want to see this show, is because this was kind of that show that, looking back through history glasses, is kind of that turning point for music forever. So I just felt like I really needed to be at that show. Plus, Jimi Hendrix, he brought those wild solos. He was loud. That was another thing he brought too, was being loud. Rock is associated with being loud. He was kind of one of the reasons why, because he would just crank the shit out of his music. And if you listen to any song from this show specifically, there's clips on YouTube. You can listen to the album wherever. It's loud. You can just tell it's loud by how overdriven everything is, and just it pushes right up to that volume limit. But also his stage presence, he was eccentric, he was sexual. I mean, he basically had sex with his guitar while he's trying to light it on fire, humping the amps and shit. It was great stage performance. And then he kind of also just brought that fuzz and the wah really into the mainstream. Those are two pedals that are always going to be associated with him as the person who made them iconic. So he did a lot for music, whether you like him or not. And so this was just one that I had to be at. And the cool thing, or the weird thing about this show, is when he did all that shit. So especially at the end, so he only played 9 songs. It wasn't a very long set. And that's typical, like for a festival set to be a little bit shorter. But when I looked actually at that whole tour, he was only playing like 9 to 11 songs per show, which is not a lot. I don't know if that was common for that time. Maybe just people were only playing 10 songs, or, I mean, he only had the one album, but he did a lot of covers. But so he didn't play a lot at this festival, but it's iconic. And it's because of what he does at the end there. But the interesting thing about it is if you watch the video clip of him destroying his guitar, the crowd, like, you can hear some people cheering, but the crowd is actually kind of silent, which now we think about it as like this mega event, and the crowd would go absolutely nuts for it because it's become iconicized. But the crowd was, I don't know if they were in shock. I don't know if they didn't like it. It's really hard to say. There's interviews of people who were there, and some people were just like, I didn't know how to react. I was so just in shock because no one had ever seen anything like this before. Now, yes, the Who were smashing their guitars and their instruments, and so it was happening. But also at this time, there's not the internet. So there's not social media. There's not even really like bootleg videotapes that just go around that people can get. And so people may have heard of these things happening, but people aren't really seeing them happen that much. And you think it may be a rumor until you actually see it. So you're kind of blown away when you see it. And so that's probably why they react the way they did. It'd be cool now just to go back and be in that crowd and experience that crowd from that moment. But let me start that again.
Yeah.
So the reason he was into lighting his guitar on fire is kind of this rivalry with the Who. And it started out, this wasn't actually the first time that he had lit his guitar on fire. The first time he did it was at Finsbury Park, Astoria in England. And he was sitting around backstage with some of the band members and managers and people like that. And they were trying to figure out like how they could top the Who, because he was kind of doing the same, like destroying instruments, but the Who was already doing that. And they were like, well, do you want to just be compared to the guy who's trying to do what the Who is doing? And they were talking, and one of the managers or somebody was like, what if you light your guitar on fire? And then Jimmy sits there for like 10 seconds, and then he turns to someone and he's like, go get a bottle of lighter fluid. So, and the rest was history. He lit his guitar on fire that night and then did it again at this show because, of course, the Who were playing at this show, and they were set to headline that night because they won a coin flip, and that lit a fire under Hendrix. Pun very much intended on that one. And he lit his guitar on fire. But he also, if you just watch that last clip, so it's the last song is Wild Thing, and he just absolutely just goes ham on the solos. It's loud, it's crazy, it's so good. It's just really fun to watch. So I can't imagine being there. It would be such an experience. So that's kind of why I have to go with him in this show specifically. And plus, he was just one of those guys, going back to his influence. He influenced a lot of my favorites. I mean, he was also an influence on me, but also I can hear his playing in John Frusciante of the Red Hot Chili Peppers, John Mayer in his blues stuff, Mike McCready of Pearl Jam, just to name a few. You can hear Hendrix through these guys. Hendrix and Gilmour are probably the two players that I can trace my style of play back to. Neither are necessarily my favorite guitar player, but I can definitely hear myself in both of them. And so I'm just a big fan of guys that they also influenced. Plus, there's the myth of the 27 Club. And this might be like the best way to get let down that I was talking about, of like, we hold that group of people in such high regard. Were they actually that good? I don't know. We talked about that on the 27 Club episode. Also, it's just an iconic performance. So yeah, that is one that history still talks about to this day. And then I guess one other reason would just be the time period. I think if I could experience any other time period, it would be the late 60s, early 70s, especially for music. It's just so many of my favorites, and people who are influenced by my favorites come from this period. And plus, rock music was where it was at. Like, rock music was king. So there's so many people in that era I would love to see. Bob Dylan, especially when he went electric, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, Pink Floyd, Janis Joplin, all around this time period would be absolutely insane. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many more people and bands and artists that we could see around that time that we could talk about forever. But those are some of the main reasons. And so, yes, this is the show. If I could see any show, any artist, living or dead, at least right now, it's Jimi Hendrix, Monterey Pop, 1967.